Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Ideology Explained. Today we're talking about the most requested ideology, Titoism. Titoism is a very broad term. It generally means that which the former Yugoslav leader Josip Broz, usually called Tito, was doing. It's a very hard to define term, and to understand it we have to understand Tito himself. He was a leader of partisans in Yugoslavia during the Second World War. That means he spent his time leading resistance fighters against the Nazi occupation of his country. At this time he was best buddies with Stalin because they were fighting a common enemy. He was never on good footing with the Western Allies, at least not during the war. TLDR, Tito became the Prime Minister and later President of Yugoslavia after the war. This was when he started to implement many of his ideas, most of which were communist, because, fun fact, he was a communist. We will get back into the economic parts of Titoism in a bit. After the war, the alliance between Stalin and Tito broke down. Stalin enforced similar forms of socialism to the centrally planned USSR in most Eastern European countries. This was usually done by encouraging the local leftist parties to unite, and as soon as they had a majority in parliament, they would ban all non-leftist parties. Obviously, the USSR made sure to mostly support parties that were USSR friendly. This is why the Eastern Bloc countries were often called satellites of the USSR. This is debatable, and as I've pointed out before, by that standard Western Europe was American satellites, but I won't deny that the Eastern Bloc countries gave up some of their autonomy in order to work with the USSR more closely. So it was notable that Yugoslavia, under the leadership of Tito, refused to work with the Soviet Union to such an extent. Most notably, they didn't join Comecon, which was an agreement by socialist nations about trade, and they didn't join the Warsaw Pact, that was the alliance created by the socialist states to counter NATO and its aggression. Yugoslavia instead founded the Non-Aligned Movement, which was a collection of countries that did not wish to take part in the Cold War. That means they were neither on the side of the USA and NATO, nor on the side of the USSR and the Warsaw Pact. This was the third faction in the Cold War, and it's usually overlooked, probably because they weren't pointing nuclear warheads on other countries. Yugoslavia under Tito had good relations with both the West and the East, even going as far as to trade with both of them. Tito was very good at diplomacy and made lots of friends. This can be shown by what happened when Tito eventually died. His funeral was the largest state funeral in history. It included 4 kings, 36 heads of state, 6 princes, 40 heads of government, 8 vice presidents, and 47 ministers of foreign affairs from both sides of the Iron Curtain and beyond. In total, 128 countries were represented. That's more than 2/3 of the countries that existed at the time. That's how beloved he was. Let's now have a look at the economy. It was notably different from the one of other socialist states at the time. This was because Tito believed that socialism should have to be achieved differently depending on which country it was established in, instead of following a set list of steps written by another country. This again put him at odds with the USSR, which had a list of steps they wanted Yugoslavia to follow. The economy of most socialist states in Europe was a centrally planned state socialist economy, which I've made a video about before. The Yugoslav economy was structured around the idea of self-management, which is this word, which I will not attempt to pronounce because it has many syllables, which scares me. This socialist self-management, as it was known, was intended to do multiple things, but the main goal was to reduce the prevalence of the state in the economy. A main step towards that was to empower workers' councils. These councils were made up of all employees of socially owned companies, and these councils supervised and elected the management of the companies, thereby giving the workers the control over the means of production more directly than in a centrally planned state socialist system. Yugoslavia had major problems with unemployment during this time. I have not heard any convincing reason for why, so I made up my own, take it with a grain of salt. I think the problem was that there was no mechanism for creating new businesses. The state tried to keep out of the economy and individual capitalists didn't exist anymore, so the amount of businesses stagnated as the population increased, which caused more unemployment. Feel free to tell me why I'm wrong. In the 70s, the concept of associated labor became important, I think, according to Wikipedia. But there's literally no source for anything here, like it's all citation needed, and I've not been able to find any English language source for any of this, so everything I'm about to say may be completely wrong. Be warned. The idea behind associated labor was to make the right to decision making and share in profit dependent on the amount of labor invested. For this, all companies were organized in a new hierarchy to change the way the management operated. They still competed as before, and the individual companies making up these groups were still financially independent. The workers themselves were organized into trade unions, which were independent from the state. The workers also had the right to strike, which doesn't sound that important, but it was kinda rare in the Eastern Bloc. Any worker or groups of workers could start a strike for whatever reason. That's the socialism built by Tito. It later changed and collapsed, but that's out of the scope of this video. Nowadays, the term Titoism is really badly defined. It can mean this economy we talked about, it can mean the political strategy of making each form of socialism fit the conditions of the country it's in, or it can mean being neutral in the Cold War and making friends with both sides. In the successor states of Yugoslavia, Titoism is often used as a shorthand for the good old days, without any specific economic or political connotation besides the idea that the past was better. So Titoism means lots of things depending on who is talking about it and why. And that's all I had to say about that. Thanks for watching. See ya! Did you know that all of my videos have no ads? That's because of my lovely Patreons who give me money to keep me safe from the worry of being demonetized. I would like to thank them and especially thank Darius the Bird, Aaron J. Patton, Hikaru, Birdington Girdington, Generkis77, Joy, Morally Conflicted Tortoise, Tyler Dang, Trey and Klastrup for their generous donations.